For loops are the most common type of loop in JavaScript. What makes them different than the earlier while loop is that for loops force you to specifically define the starting point and stopping point of your loop, as well as how your loop is going to proceed to the next step. Now you might be saying to yourself, how is that any different from a while loop? In a while loop, I had to specify all of those same things. Well, the difference is in a for loop, you have to define all of that up front in the for statement. In this example, I have a for loop that prints out the values 0 through 5. Let's look at how it's set up. For a standard for loop, it requires the same 3 pieces of information as before, and each of these pieces are separated by a semicolon. The first piece is your starting point. For this example, we have a variable I that is set to 0. The second piece is your stopping point. This is going to tell us when we want our loop to stop. In this case, we want the loop to stop executing once our variable I is no longer less than 6. If I can no longer satisfy that condition, then our loop will exit. The third and final piece of our for loop is how our loop should proceed to the next step. In this example, we say that each time our loop runs, we want to increase the value of I by 1. Alright, so that's the setup. For this next part, I'm going to walk you through each iteration of our for loop. Normally, you don't really think about or notice how each iteration of a loop runs because your code executes so fast. So what I'm doing here is sort of slowing it down for you so you can see how the code is going to be interpreted as it's being ran. I've also added this table so you can see the value of I throughout the lifetime of the loop. If you're ever writing loops and your loop isn't behaving exactly how you might expect, doing an exercise like this can be really helpful. At the end, I'll paste this code into the console so you can see it running at full speed. Okay, so when our loop starts, I is set to 0. Then we check the condition to see if I is less than 6. If that condition is true, then we go into our loop. So in this statement, we're just going to print out the value of I. So printing out I equals 0. Awesome. So we just finished our first step of the loop, and now we need to go look and see how we've defined to get to the next step. So our code jumps back up and it looks and it says, okay, we're going to increment I by 1. So I is now 1. Let's check our condition again to make sure that we want to jump into the loop. And if I is less than 6, which it is again, it's going to evaluate to true, and we're going to jump back into the loop. We'll run the statement again, and now we've got printing out I equals 1. And we're just going to continue this process until the condition I is less than 6 is no longer true. So we'll look, we'll increment I by 1, now it's 2, we'll look at our condition, it evaluates to true again, and we print out the value. So I can just keep running through this, and eventually we will get to the very end where I is going to be 6, and 6 is not less than 6. So here we go, we're at 4, now we're moving to 5, condition's still true, we print out the value. Okay, we get to the end. Now we increment the value one more time. Now it's 6, and when we go to check our condition, it evaluates to false, and we jump out of the loop. Now just to show you our for loop running in full speed, here I've got it pasted into the console, and when I hit enter, boom, we've got printing out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and once we get to 6, the condition doesn't hold true, and we jump out of the loop.